Fear grips Igboland as a man narrates how Fulani herdsmen massacre over 16 people in Ebonyi state. Fulani herdsmen allegedly attacked the Kalaha community in Ebonyi state, killing at least 16 people and burning houses. Survivors are now displaced, seeking refuge in safer areas. Just hours before the attack, Nigerian security officials, including soldiers and police, assured residents they were safe and should not leave their homes. However, no protection was provided when the attack happened. The attackers surrounded the community overnight and launched an assault in the morning while people were preparing for church. 2 people were killed inside a church and over 25 houses were burned down. After the massacre, soldiers and police arrived, apologized, and took away some corpses, but left without staying to protect the remaining residents. The governor of Ebonyi state urged residents not to retaliate, sparking outrage among the people who feel unprotected and abandoned by the government. Some Nigerians believe that if a similar attack happened in northern Nigeria against Fulani people, there would have been a stronger response. Critics accuse southern governors of colluding with Fulani attackers. They highlight other similar attacks in different parts of the country, such as Kaduna state, where Fulani terrorists allegedly killed 9 people and kidnapped 17. The Nigerian government allegedly suppresses media coverage of Fulani terrorist activities to prevent demoralizing the army and to avoid global scrutiny. The Kaduna state government reportedly granted amnesty to repentant terrorists, while simultaneously ignoring ongoing massacres in rural communities. In some areas, security forces have disarmed local residents under the pretext of preventing ethnic clashes, leaving them defenseless against attacks. Meanwhile, Fulani herdsmen continue to kill and displace indigenous people without consequences. The air in Kalaha, a small community in Ebonyi state, was heavy with silence just hours before dawn. People were asleep, some perhaps tossing and turning with the usual worries of life, food, school fees for their children, and the unpredictable economy. But no one could have predicted the horror that was about to befall them. As the first hints of morning light crept into the sky, a deadly invasion began. A group of armed men, allegedly Fulani herdsmen, had crept into the village under the cover of darkness. They moved like shadows, unseen but deadly. By the time the first gunshots rang out, it was too late. Panic spread like wildfire. People woke up to the sound of bullets tearing through walls, screams of terror echoing in the air, and the sudden sharp smell of smoke as houses were set on fire. Women grabbed their children, running blindly into the bush, hoping to escape. Men who dared to fight back were cut down mercilessly. It was not just an attack, it was a massacre. And yet, just the day before, officials from the Nigerian security forces had come into Kalaha. Soldiers, police officers, government representatives, people that the villagers should have been able to trust. They had held meetings telling the people not to worry. They had looked them in the eye and said, "You are safe. Stay in your homes. We have everything under control." Now, as the bullets flew and flames devoured homes, those promises meant nothing. In the heart of the chaos, inside a small church where people had gathered to pray for safety, 2 men lost their lives. The church, a place meant to be a sanctuary, became their final resting place. Outside, the numbers of the dead continued to rise. 6, 10, 16. Some say it was more than that, but who was still counting? When homes were being burned, when entire families were being wiped out, numbers became meaningless. And then, when the damage had been done, when the attackers had left behind smoldering ruins and grieving families, the Nigerian security forces returned. This time they were not there to protect. They were there to apologize. The soldiers moved through the wreckage, shaking their heads, picking up bodies. They loaded the corpses onto their trucks, said a few words of regret, and then, just like that, they were gone. No one stayed behind to guard the remaining survivors. No one promised justice. No one promised revenge. When the governor of Ebonyi state, Francis Nwifuru, finally spoke, His words were not what the people wanted to hear. He told them not to retaliate. He urged them to remain peaceful. Peace. What a strange thing to ask of people who had just seen their loved ones slaughtered. The anger in Kalaha was palpable. The people felt betrayed, abandoned. They asked the same question over and over again. If this had happened in northern Nigeria, if 16 Fulani people had been murdered in one night, would the response have been the same? Would the government have told them not to retaliate? Would the army have simply arrived late, picked up bodies and left? For many in southern Nigeria, this was not just an isolated attack. It was part of a larger, terrifying pattern. Ebonyi State was not the only place to suffer. In Kaduna State, another attack had occurred just days earlier. 9 people were killed. 17 were kidnapped, dragged into the unknown by armed men who would likely demand ransom or worse. The Kaduna state government, rather than cracking down on the killers, had chosen a different approach. They had granted amnesty to repentant terrorists. Men who had spent years killing, burning, and destroying now stood before cameras, swearing on the Holy Quran that they had changed. And for that, they were rewarded. But what about the people of Kalaha? Where was their justice? In some parts of Nigeria, the government had actively disarmed local communities, telling them that taking up arms for self-defense could lead to ethnic violence. But what happened when the killers did not disarm? What happened when the Fulani herdsmen continued their attacks, unchecked, unpunished? As the sun rose over Kalaha the next morning, the village was unrecognizable. What had once been homes were now piles of ashes. What had once been streets were littered with the remnants of people's lives, burned clothing, broken furniture, the occasional photograph half buried in the dirt. Survivors gathered what little they could and left. Some walked for miles, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs. Some found shelter in nearby villages, while others moved to the already overcrowded refugee camps that had become too common in Nigeria. For those who remained behind, life had changed forever. The churches that had once been filled with song and prayer now stood empty. I want to share with you a story that has weighed heavily on my heart. A story of fear, loss, and the deep betrayal felt by an entire community in Igboland. This is the story of what happened in the Kalaha community of Ebonyi State, a place that was once known for its warmth and togetherness, but now finds itself haunted by a brutal act of violence that no one should ever have to endure. I still remember the mix of disbelief and sorrow that washed over me when I first heard the details. It was a chilly morning in early February when, after hours of comforting assurances from our security forces, the community was suddenly plunged into chaos. Just a few hours earlier, soldiers and police had come by with smiles and promises, urging everyone to stay in their homes because it was safe. Their words had been meant to calm fears, to give hope, but they only deepened the sting of what was to come. In the early hours of that fateful Sunday, as many residents were preparing for church, a routine moment filled with hope and promise, a dark cloud descended over the community. Hundreds of armed men, identified as Fulani herdsmen, had surrounded the area in the quiet of the night. When dawn broke, the attackers launched a sudden, merciless assault. Gunshots shattered the stillness, and within moments the comforting routine of the day turned into a nightmare. Houses that had stood for generations were set ablaze, their flames dancing in a tragic tribute to the lives being destroyed before anyone could react. I spoke with one man from the community who recounted the terror of that morning in vivid detail. He described how, as he and his neighbors were just beginning to stir and get ready for their daily rituals, they were abruptly awakened by the harsh sounds of gunfire and the acrid smell of burning wood. In the confusion and panic, many of them tried to run, but there was nowhere to hide. The attackers had encircled the village so completely that escape was nearly impossible. Even the church, a sanctuary that usually offered solace and hope, was not spared. 2 souls lost their lives inside its walls while they were in prayer, a reminder that nowhere was safe from the cruelty of that day. The devastation was not limited to lives alone. Over 25 houses were burned to the ground, leaving scores of families homeless and heartbroken. The survivors, many of whom had only moments before believed in the promise of safety given by the authorities, suddenly found themselves abandoned in a landscape of destruction. Their cherished homes, filled with memories and love, were reduced to smoldering ruins in the blink of an eye. What makes this story even more heartbreaking is what came after the attack. When the soldiers and police finally arrived, their presence was not one of protection, but of a hollow formality. They offered apologies, an apology that rang painfully empty against the backdrop of such loss. With little more than a few hurried steps, they gathered some of the bodies and then left the scene, leaving behind a community in desperate need of care and protection. Instead of the strong, reassuring presence that was promised, there was silence and a deep, gnawing sense of betrayal. Adding salt to the wound was the reaction of the state governor. In his public address, he urged the survivors not to seek revenge. For many in the community, these words were not comforting. They felt like a dismissal of their grief and a call to passive resignation. The governor's statement came across as if the lives lost and the homes burned were mere inconveniences, a cost to be endured rather than a tragedy to be avenged. This response sparked outrage, with many residents and citizens across Nigeria questioning why a leader would tell people not to defend themselves when their very lives were at stake. Some have even argued that if such an attack had occurred in northern Nigeria against Fulani people, the government's response would have been swift and robust. This comparison, though difficult to hear, has fueled a dangerous perception of a double standard in how our nation values human life. The belief that some lives matter more than others has only deepened the sense of abandonment felt by those in Ebonyi state. Critics have gone so far as to suggest that certain southern state governors might be turning a blind eye or even collaborating with those responsible for these attacks. It is a painful accusation, but one that echoes loudly in a community that has been left defenseless and voiceless. I remember another account from a local man who described how, just before the attack, government officials and security officers had visited Kalaha with promises of peace. They had met with community members, including women's groups, and assured everyone that there was nothing to fear. They urged residents to stay put, to believe that their homes were safe and that no harm would come their way. Yet, less than 10 hours after these assurances, the unthinkable happened. Out of the dark, armed men descended on the community with an onslaught that caught everyone off guard. In a matter of moments, the reassuring words of the authorities were drowned out by the sound of gunfire and the roar of flames. In the chaos that followed, families were torn apart. I listened with a heavy heart as one elder described how he saw neighbors carrying their meager belongings, trying desperately to escape the encircling attackers. The fear was palpable. People who had spent their entire lives in Kalaha were now forced to flee into the night, leaving behind all that they had known and loved. Their only possessions were the memories of better times and the hope that somehow, somewhere, safety awaited them. The brutality of the attack was compounded by the fact that the security forces, who were supposed to be the protectors of the people, were nowhere to be found when it mattered most. Their delayed response, arriving only after the massacre had unfolded, left an indelible mark of betrayal on the hearts of the survivors. I cannot help but feel a deep sadness when I think about the promises made by those in uniform, promises that ended up being nothing more than empty words. The irony is crushing. Just hours before the attack, these same forces had been telling the community that they were safe, only for the safety to vanish when the need was greatest. In the days and weeks that followed, anger and disbelief grew into widespread protests and outcries across the nation. People took to social media, to town hall meetings, and to the streets to demand accountability. They questioned how it was possible for the state to preach safety and then allow such a disaster to occur. Many voices compared the attack in Kalaha to other recent incidents in Nigeria, such as a similar attack in Kaduna state, where Fulani terrorists reportedly killed 9 people and kidnapped 17. The pattern was disturbing, a cycle of violence that seemed to repeat with little to no intervention from the very institutions meant to safeguard the public.
Community. This is Amegon and Kalaha, initial local government area of Ebonyi State. I can see some people are carrying food, some people are carrying their wares, their everything that remains in their houses, migrating to maybe a safer place where they can at least have a sleep. Can you tell us what happened in your community?
Simon Ide. The Bible, first of this month. Ndami, then this into local government, the officers of Ebonyi State, they are Lebai.
They came here.
They brought to the security.
They came with the security. That they came here to make peace.
And you help leaders of the community, including women fellowship.
Then after discussion with them, including women fellowship.
I shall hear Belmuto. Let's go and yell and do Fulani, Ebro, Okainishi, I know that without Bajola.
They told us that they have made peace with us and the Fulani Herdsmen, that we should not leave our houses, we should stay, that there is peace.
They probably had no Burundi Likutani, no get call a crying, the hand on your eye, no go to book, Okainishi.
They told us that we should not leave our houses, we should not leave our community, that nothing will happen and nothing will happen to us.
Quarter to 9 o'clock, second of February.
At about 9 o'clock on Sunday, being 2nd of February.
Yeah, you got a problem, Dami, Fulani. He carried 5,000. Abbas around the Mascolani and Yabaligi, the young good problem, who will give a mind.
Just less than few hours, about less than 10 hours after the soldiers and some government officials, police came here to tell us that we should not leave our houses. Less than 10 hours, a group of people numbering hundreds surround our community and started attacking us. We don't know. We didn't know that those attackers came in the night and surrounded the community.
That's exactly 9 o'clock.
Immediately we woke up and we were preparing to go to church. What we were hearing is just guns. They are burning houses. We don't know where to run to. They went even to the church and killed 2 persons. They burnt over 25 houses, despite the fact that the soldiers, military Nigerian army, told our people that we should not live anywhere, that they are going to protect us. After they have killed over 18 persons, burnt houses, the soldiers, the Nigerian army operatives, they came back. They were telling us sorry. Immediately after that, they left and went home. They did not even stay to even protect the remaining people that were staying around. They just carry 10 people, over 10 people that were recovered corpses. Despite the fact we are still looking for more people, about 5 of them or more, the soldiers and the police, they left and carried those corpses and left.
Nigeria, Ebonyi State. One day.
If we are part of this country and part of Ebonyi State, our security agencies should not be planning how to kill all of us.
Okay, this is another house here. That's burnt many houses. This is house that belongs to our brother Najebe. They have finished many houses here. Just look at this one. You go around, you see now. They have burnt the building down. Look at another one here. Look at another mighty building. Look at this one. Look at it. Mighty building. They burned it down, and including the family. They have buried them. Many of them have died. Just imagine the building here. Imagine it. The building just finished it up. They burn it down. They burn it down. They burn it down. All the whole properties in this building has burned down. All the whole properties has burned down in this building. You can.
So we are starting with these sad stories, which has received near zero reportage in Nigeria media, unfortunately. The first is the killings reported in Kauru, local government area of Kaduna. In the last 4 days, people from this following, I want to bring them up, right? People from these following communities, families from these communities like Lakada, Kakure, Kadi, Fadanruruma, and denser areas of Kauru local government area of Kaduna State. They have been under the barrage of the Fulani terrorists who have laid siege to these communities and ransacked them. Not only that they have killed 9 people confirmed, currently they have also kidnapped 17 people, have been kidnapped and taken away. Their whereabouts is unknown, and these communities, they have become desolate. I actually tried to look at the area up in the, in the Google Earth, my usual way of trying to check out what it is like. How is it so convenient for terrorists in this part of Nigeria to succeed in ransacking communities and without what you can call, help from the security agency? So this is what I found. This is what the Kauru local government area actually looks like. All right. And and if you place the topography of the area, so to say, so the densely populated parts, and then the other communities who are like at the fringes, like at the fringe of the local government, right? So easy come, easy go, and the other areas are pretty much like, and most of them ungoverned, unmanned. So these people, you see, this is why it is kind of like easier, if you want to put it that way. Nigerian security agents or the Nigerian government, they have done so well. We have to give it to them, especially under this Tifnumbu. They have done so well enough, right, to make sure that the news like this, they do not make it to the general public, talk less of the international community. But the level of insecurity under this Tifnumbu's regime is so like alarming. Just a week or 2 ago, the Kaduna State governor celebrated the it wasn't even surrendering, right? It was like celebrated the repentant terrorists of his own state. The terrorists who have kidnapped, who have raped, who have killed, hundreds and thousands of people within that Kaduna state. Suddenly, they said that they swore by the Holy Quran that they won't do it again. And therefore, they received the government amnesty. Meanwhile, this is just a smoke screen, like a smoke and mirror, right? It is just to cover up other things, whereby if you report any act of terrorism in Kaduna State, you will be tagged an alarmist. Because the impression they want to give is to say everything is fine. It may not be as horrible as it was under El Rufaya. But others will tell you that, well, it is the same. The difference is that lesser and lesser people are interested in reporting what is going on in this part of Nigeria. And they may be right. But somehow, when this Tifnumbu's illegitimate government came in, they instructed the media houses that they should not report anything that has to do with the atrocities of the Fulani terrorists, Boko Haram terrorists, and other terrorists operating in that contraption. According to them, this kind of onslaught on their media started all the way back from Boko Haram's time, but specifically under this Tifnumbu, they were told that their reportage is demoralizing the soldiers, and therefore, right, they shouldn't report about all this. So that simply means that the people who have become victims and those that will still become victims of terrorism in Nigeria, right, they are on their own. Because if you dare go out to say, oh, here we are victims of Fulani terrorism, or victims of Lakurawa, or victims of Boko Haram, the system has been sort of rigged enough to kind of like treat you with disbelief. And if you insist, you will be treated as an alarmist, and you may even be arrested or silently killed by them as well. Same thing happened before I even get to Ebonyi. So I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, when one Machala Bugaje, one of the alleged most wanted but most notorious terrorists, Fulani terrorists from this northern part of Nigeria, recorded a video of himself and his fellow terrorists and published it on social media that is also embracing amnesty. And he was willing, as part of the deal, to release at least 50 Nigerians that he has, that are in his captivity, that were kidnapped by him. He's not releasing all of the victims, though. He's releasing 50 as a bargaining chip. So I don't know if they've taken him up on his offer or not. But when you hear the word Fulani terrorists and how the terrorists actually operate, sometimes it's just going to sound more or less like, it's going to sound to you like a fiction. Because sometimes you can't imagine that, is there any security sort of a system in that country that terrorists have become so established? They have become so established that if you cross their territory, you are gone. Nigeria won't come and look for you. And if you come back alive, well, maybe you still probably have some purpose, or what have you left on earth. It is a trip or a territory. Their territories are more or less like territories of possible no return. They live like kings. They worship. They organize a community sort of address about areas where they have conquered. Nigerian government gazetted those areas in their own book. They call them ungoverned areas. Areas that the terrorists have more or less like declared independence from Nigeria. So this Machala Bugaje guy was seen 2 days ago. No, Monday. Okay, it was on Friday, probably 3 days ago, right? He hasn't been apprehended. We haven't seen this handover of Nigerians he kidnapped, but he is still there with all his weapons and his fighters and what have you. And guess what? They were having Friday Jumat prayer. I can't even have the video. So I'll show you this. This is just so you know what it looks like. The life of the terrorists in Nigeria. How they are not hiding. That's another thing. The military may be giving you the impression that they are bombing this part, or they are shooting them in this side, just to kind of like oil their own propaganda machine, because they are also running PR now. Nigerian soldiers, Nigerian army, running PR online to make them act or appear like they were actually capable of protecting you, but they are not. Machala and his other terrorist gang, just about 3 days ago. If you ask them, what exactly are these guys fighting for? But they are terrorists. On the one hand, they will tell you that they are fighting for an Islamic state, which means Nigeria must become an Islamic state. And slowly but surely, Nigeria will become an Islamic state. So in their effort of turning Nigeria to Islamic state, they turned on innocent people, ransacking villages, slaughtering and butchering people, innocent people, then kidnapped as many of them as they want. And in all of this, Nigeria has no plan of protecting our citizens. No plan. Very unfortunate. So similarly, just yesterday, right, in a community called, I want to kind of like get the name right. It's called Amegu Kalaha community of Ishelu local government area of Ebonyi state, where the Fulani terrorists again laid siege. And their whole story is a little bit kind of like extra, because the surviving, or let me say the survivors from the attacks in this community last night, they have been aware of the gathering of these Fulani terrorists around their community. The young people in this area, even the elderly in the area, they put together, and in an effort of trying to kind of like chase away these murderous terrorists from their communities, they said Nigerian army came to the rescue of this would-be terrorist by scaring off the people of this community from, they said they shouldn't start any communal war. That's what they called it. Meanwhile, they have been suspecting this terrorist, the Fulani terrorist within around their border. So yesterday, from early in the morning, right, the terrorists, they struck. And from the reports, they have already killed 16 people. You with me? 16 innocent people have been slaughtered by this invading Fulani terrorist. Yeah, their state governor, Umfurumu, whatever his name is called, has come out to say, now that the deed is done, okay, he came out there to say they are going to find the perpetrators. But guess what? Hundreds of people have had to run away from their community, from their homes. Those who could carry pots, carry stove, a little food, and they have now become refugees in the neighboring community in Ebonyi State, in eastern part of Nigeria. This was last night. So same way, where is my Google app? Just one sec, okay? Amegu, Kalaha, that's the name of the community. I want to put it on and show you. And the, what do you call it? The local government area is called Ishielu local government area of Ebonyi State. I remember during the Devulumayi time as the governor of Ebonyi, right? It was this kind of killings as well that took place. And Devulumayi, who was on hand, give me a second, let me put this. All right, I think the whole thing was like a bit acting up, okay? So sorry about that. It should be fine after this. Now, this is what my Google Earth shows me about this community as well. And here, one sec. So similarly, right? It is not a very massive local government area, if you put it right. However, let me see if I can have the 3D street view for it, so that that will give us a bit of topography. Like that means the area, what the area seems like, you know. So again, it is to take advantage of it does help, right? So, because the moment they strike and attack like that, right? So they can easily just jump back into the forest. So in this community, they have killed, this be recorded, they have killed 16 innocent people. Again, this Fulani terrorist. Now, it's not making it right to what do you call it, to their main media, surely, because the agenda is to make so that if Numbu and his gang won't look bad, you know, they won't look bad, and until people become victims, which I actually do not really wish on even the worst of your enemies, if you can imagine having enemies, right? The level of the terrorism that people have been subjected to, and then the expected, I don't even know if people expect that anyway, but the expected protection from your own government, which is totally missing, it makes the matter worse. Kind of like People are just sitting duck, waiting to become victims. So any effort, according to the people from that community, they said they did make efforts, made move to prevent this kind of attacks. But the Nigerian army, the military, came to their communities, took away their weapons for those who had weapons, and then warned them seriously to not trigger any form of what they call it, like tribal clash. So the other part of their media, that is, they actually reported it as herdsmen versus the people of this community. And my question is this: if the clash, as they usually love to describe it, right? The clash was between the herdsmen and these communities. How come that herdsmen that were supposed to have come from, like, where? From Futa Sorrow, Futa Gallon, abi Futa, Futa dipshit that they come from, right? So if you can imagine the distance between Ebonyi and Futa Sorrow in the Sahel, we are talking about over 1,000 kilometers apart. So how could people who invaded the community succeeded in killing the people in that community, 16 of them, then displacing hundreds of them as well? How can you call that clash? How did the people of this community, how did the people of Amegu, Kalaha, how did they clash with herdsmen in their homes? How? Like, how do you clash with people in your own home? How do you clash with people on your own farm? Like, it's your farm. So anybody who trespass to your farm, they are the ones who have come onto your farm. So how do you clash with? And then when you clash, how come that it is the indigenous people in their own communities, that are always recording casualties? It is unfortunate. I hear that, the Ebonyi State governor, Abina government, says that they are going to find the perpetrators. No, you won't. No, you are not going to find them. Because this is just like a medicine after death. Every now and then people will say people should defend themselves. People should defend themselves. But in reality, the entire system that is rigged against you prevents you from fighting for yourself or defending yourself. So the ideal thing is probably to just do it. If I have an advice to give, and if my advice will count, right? For the communities who have the presence of all these terrorists hanging about, and you're seeing them, and somehow, in some areas, so if you go to Badagry right now, you will think Badagry is half Fulani, half Yorubas right now. To the point that somebody in that Badagry, who they claim was an Oba, had to kind of like crown a Fulani there as their, what do you call it, their Seriki Fulani. Because according to them, they have so many Fulanis in their forest that for peace to reign, they decided to just make them feel welcomed by appointing one of them as Seriki for peace to reign in your own community, for peace to reign. If not, they believe that they may just wake up one day and start killing them. And they don't want that. They don't want that. So what they want, that's why they are like appointing them as Seriki, giving them titles to make them feel welcomed. So my own advice would be, if you have all it takes, if you have all the means, right? There's no point in trying to accommodate those who are still going to kill you anyway. And there's no point in trying to, protest about it. Just do it. Get rid of them from your community. So if you have the wherewithal, do it first and ask questions later. Because there are communities who have discussed this. Look at this community in Ebonyi. They categorically had a meeting and the able-bodied men in their community, they came together. They gave an ultimatum to these Fulani terrorists that surrounded their community to leave. And then the military came in to warn them to desist. Cease and desist. And then that's it. Yesterday, 16 innocent people, including women and children, were slaughtered by these terrorists. And now the government is, we are going to find them. We are going to bring them to book. No, they are not bringing anybody to book. In another few weeks or in another few months, they're going to strike again. Maybe in another community where they have been locking around as well. You are on your own. In that contraption, everyone is on his own. So if you have what it takes, the ideal thing is just do it. And ask questions later. If I can advise.
This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.